I am Lady Grace from Gainesville.
And I'm Lady Lisa of Manassas.
And I'm Lady Michelle of Haymarket.
And I'm Lady Angeline of Haymarket.
And this is our podcast for The Importance of Being Earnest by Oscar Wilde. Hello, I am Lady Grace of Gainesville.
And I'm Lady Lisa of Manassas.
And I'm Lady Michelle of Haymarket.
And I'm Lady Angeline of Haymarket.
The definition of the word earnest is serious and true, resulting from or showing sincere and intense conviction.
The Importance of Being Earnest by Oscar Wilde is a story in which the duality of earnest character satirically emphasizes the societal expectations during the Victorian time period.
The irony of the use of the name Ernest throughout the book is that Ernest was not being earnest in the slightest, as he was pretending to be a different person the whole time.
Oscar Wilde does this not only to poke fun at society, but also uses it to kind of show how in the Victorian era they were very, very, very obsessed with reputation. And it's ironic how they use the name Earnest and appear to be very earnest and sincere in public, but in reality they're lying to everyone that they love and themselves.
The historicism/cultural lens is a lens in which we analyze the book of the time period during the book. And in this time period specifically, people did what society expected of them.
This book takes place in the 19th century, a period of time where emphasis was placed on one's social status. And Wilde satirizes this society. In this context, we can see that Jack is affected by the lack of his social status to the point of creating a character to fulfill that absence in order to marry Gwendolyn. Obtaining a higher social status was harder in the 1880s than it is today. It was much more difficult to climb up the social ladder, and oftentimes, marrying wealthy was the only way to achieve a higher position to marry.
Yeah, and then also just reputation was extremely important to the people during this time period. It's what we touched on last time. Many people were downright obsessed with how they were perceived by the public. In this scenario, both Jack and Algernon are invested in maintaining their social image, even creating an alternative identity to be seen a certain way in society. The Victorian era emphasized a strong moral construct revolving around adhering to conservative religious values, while it employs satire to criticize the Victorian era's rigid rules on morality. Jack and Algernon use the name Earnest to hide under the masks to appear honest, sincere, and morally conscious, yet they're actively lying to both their lovers for the majority of the novel. Both men only care about their outward appearances to society, but behind closed doors, they are deceiving people. Welcome to our overview of the movie, and out of 4 stars, we give it a 2.5. And the reason why is, first and foremost, I believe that the movie didn't really capture the satire that the book had. It was just really goofy, and it was a comedy.
It felt more like they were just trying to make a funny movie than actually what Oscar Wilde was trying to do was dig deeper into the duality of society and the importance of being earnest in society, while the movie was kind of just ridiculous.
Yeah, I felt like after I finished the movie, I didn't walk out, getting an overall theme or message. I couldn't really, it didn't critique society in any way, and it was, in my opinion, I thought the movie was kind of weird.
I feel like with the critique of society part that Michelle said, I mean, Oscar Wilde tried to satirically make fun of society by using Ernest and how Ernest wants to have a different, he wants to be a different person because society wants him to be something else. But I feel like in the movie, it was kind of just, he wanted to do it to be with this girl. It was kind of more outlined around the romance, in my opinion, and he just wanted to be with this girl, and it wasn't really the societal effect on it. The mom kind of didn't agree with Ernest being with her daughter, but the overall societal effect, that she's the only one that didn't agree. It wasn't overall society that didn't agree with him. So
right,
It was very surface level. They didn't really push the Victorian era ideals. Besides Lady Bracknell, they really missed the point of Oscar Wilde and how he was trying to critique the society that they were in.
And then, you know how that one guy was oh, I'm really, I have a lot of debt too? like they like glossed over
Yeah,
that.
they
Like it
glossed
was
over it.
mostly just the romance part of it, which I feel like it, like Pride and Prejudice, is not the main thing of the book.
I agree.
So.
And one thing Grace adding about like that guy, they introduced him like having a bunch of debt, and then they never really answered it or did anything with it.
They kind of just left it alone.
One thing Oscar Wilde does really well is that he'll introduce a new thing, but by the end of the book, it gets answered, or like it always actually adds to the plot. I feel
It's
like
relevant.
yeah, it's not
Relevant.
just like random information being thrown at us.
Yeah.
That part of the movie just made me upset because it's not something Oscar Wilde would do, and it was so random.
Right. Yeah, he'd be rolling in his grave if he saw that movie.
Yeah.
Actually, so. Yeah.
Okay.
And I think in the movie too, there was a lack of like foils were different at first, but they also kind of like morphed into the same person because they like met and then they did the whole like, I thought I was getting married to Ernest, and then they were like, they kind of just joined together, and then she said something, it was like, oh, you're my sister now, and then they like followed each other around and like giggled and that kind of stuff. And it's like they just became the same person because their situation was the same, which like didn't make them different, and also the two Ernest is different at all.
Mm-hmm.
If that makes sense.
What do we think the movie did well?
I did like the settings. I liked the setting of Sicily's, like where she was learning, because it was like a wild type forest,
Yeah,
not forest,
yeah.
like garden area, and I felt like that represented her very well
Right.
and her personality.
I think. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, okay. So I feel like they definitely did following the script very well. Like they did. They followed the script almost word for word. Like, it was almost the same as the book, but the only difference is to their own interpretation. They did like certain transitions and like certain like things that the characters did and their facial expressions not the same. So had they interpreted it how Oscar Wilde probably meant it, it would have been almost exactly the same, like better.
I didn't mind the casting for many of the characters.
I thought they did well.
Yeah, I thought they did very well.
And like there was actually surprisingly some big names in there too.
Yeah.
Like the guy from the sorry, I forgot that. But yeah.
Yeah.
I think they cast it well. I mean, I think the interactions between the characters were mostly on topic and like following the script.
Like, even though they were basically the same person, I did enjoy the interactions between John and Algernon. They like really did give off brother vibes, which I do think is kind of like a clever foreshadowing to the end of the movie.
There you go. That's good.
I thought that the general acting was pretty good, especially in a movie where it is kind of ridiculous. It's really
Yeah.
I feel like sometimes the actors just take it too far and it looks really stupid. It did appear that way in this film.
Right.
I generally thought that the movie was really good. If I'm not comparing it to the book at all, I actually really liked it. I thought it was funny, and if it was just a movie on its own, it would have been like a good movie. But if you have to compare it to the book, it's not like the same.
It didn't really
Well,
take the source material and
yeah,
serious.
and it's
Yeah.
more of a modern interpretation of it, I would say, but it didn't go all the way modern, so it was kind of just like falling off of like its exact representation versus modern, you know?
Yeah, I
I
agree.
feel like
People were not getting tattoos.
oh yeah, that was so weird.
Yeah, no, that's the way I feel like that's the way they adapt a lot of books into movies, like The Great Gatsby, especially. Like, why are they listening to Jay-Z in
all
that
right.
movie?
Entertained with their
Right,
Taylor
but-
Swift music.
Anyways.
So our overall rating is a 2.5.
There's one more thing I wanted to say. I wanted to talk about the ending of the movie, because like the entire point of the book was to point out that you should be earnest about your character, but the movie undermines it at the end when John decides.
Yeah, that was
Yeah.
weird.
He wants
That was
to.
weird.
John decides to tell Gwendolyn that he found out that his name is actually Ernest, and when in reality it's not. And then
Yeah.
Lady Bracknell not saying anything too
Dude,
doesn't make sense for
it
her
was so
character
weird.
either.
Yeah, and it contradicted the whole satirical of gender roles and in that society of that time period, just in
Yes.
general. Like
Yeah.
it totally just like stomped on that whole idea.
That's really what brought down the
Yeah.
movie for me.
Honestly, yeah.
They kind of just didn't feel like a happy ending. type
Right, it
Absolutely.
didn't like closure. It's kind of
Yeah,
just like this is
closure.
still an issue that
Yeah.
you guys are dealing with. So
Like what happens
Yeah.
when she finds out his real name,
Yeah, I don't know. Obviously, she doesn't care.
Yeah. That's our
Anyways.
interpretation.
Okay, so this is my own critique and rating of the movie aspect of the importance of being earnest. And I really liked the movie. I would give it a 4 if it was just a regular movie. If it was funny, it was enjoyable to watch. But when it comes to portraying the literary aspects in the book, I would have to give it a 2.5 at most. So the whole universal idea, the point of the book is that Oscar Wilde wanted to outline the satire and the irony of like the seriousness of society within the Victorian era. And I think he did a really good job in doing this in the book, but when it comes to the movie, they didn't do as much of a good job. I feel like the whole movie kind of revolved around the romance aspect of Algernon and Gwendolyn and of Jack and Algernon and Cicely and Jack and Gwendolyn, because the whole reason in the movie that Jack really wanted to change his name was because he wanted to be able to see Gwendolyn, and I feel like the script completely matched up like almost completely with the book. I feel like the wording and everything was the same, but the actual tone and the way they played out the scenes didn't capture the whole reasoning and the whole satire aspect, because Jack didn't really want to change his name. It wasn't really poking fun at society and saying, oh, that he wanted to change his name because of the seriousness of society. He kind of just wanted to do it to be with this girl, and there wasn't really much foil. Algernon in the movie was very just copy and paste from Jack, but in the book, Algernon was a foil to him at first, and he kind of contrasted, and it kind of showed the development and the characterization of Jack into Earnest and why he wanted to be Earnest. He wanted to be Earnest because he wanted to be free from societal standards. He wanted to be able to go to the city and be a different person and be who he wants to be. But in the movie, he really just changed his name to be with Gwendolyn, and that doesn't show the actual societal aspect, as well as the whole the universal idea and the characterization part. I think that the setting they did well. They lined, like I said, they lined up the script and the setting like almost exactly with the book, but the symbols, I think they did it well, maybe almost a little better in the movie, only because they had the main symbol was the handbag that Jack or Ernest was found in. And in the movie, they did a really good job of using this symbol because they show the handbag at the beginning and they show that it's going to be a very important part of the story as a whole. And at the end, the handbag comes back around and it helps Jack to find out that his mother's actually Lady Bracknell, and his caretaker actually found him in that handbag, which is the exact handbag that he was left in. And it all comes to a happy conclusion, and Jack is finally accepted into the family. But the only twist at the ending in the movie that doesn't necessarily tie the whole plot together is the fact that Ernest, he finds what his name is. He looks in a name book of births and he lies, and he says that his name actually is Ernest, which would kind of tie everything together and say, oh, he was being earnest, like the importance of being earnest this whole time when he was lying about his name, when he was making a fake personality, he actually was being earnest and truthful and everything's all good, but he lied. His name, and Lady Bracknell looked at the book after and it shows that his name was actually John, which doesn't really tie the whole story together. It kind of leaves it like loose-ended, which further outlines the whole societal point, and it's like Jack wouldn't actually be accepted by society, and the only reason he was accepted was because his name was Ernest, like Gwendolyn wanted, and because he was Lady Bracknell's son. So him actually like saying that at the end of the movie, I didn't really like because he wasn't earnest. He lied. And then I think that overall, like the rest of the movie was pretty spot on. It was just the universal idea wasn't didn't really capture it that well. The symbol, I thought the symbol was good. The setting was good. The tone didn't really capture it that well. And the plot events and structure, the only plot part that I didn't like was the ending. But overall, it portrayed the actual script and everything. It just didn't portray the literary elements as I would have wanted it to. So I give it a 2.5 out of 4.
This is my personal analysis of the importance of being earnest film and how it stays true or doesn't stay true to literary elements in the novel. So the first thing is one big literary device that Oscar Wilde uses, not just in this novel but in his entire career, is characterization. It's how he builds deeper meaning within his stories. And in the play, the characters are very exaggerated, over the top, and that's how satire is built. The tone of satire is built. They're very theatrical characters, over the top, dramatic. You wouldn't meet them in real life. And the movie, for the most part, does a good job at keeping that true, except the two characters that I thought that they took creative liberties with and add little nuances to that I just thought was very interesting. The first one was Lady Bracknell. In the novel specifically, she's very, one-dimensional, very much cares about class rankings, where someone falls in society in terms of classes. She is an authoritative figure who refuses to let Gwendolyn marry Jack, aka Ernest. Versus in the film, she's kind of seen as someone who is softened a little bit more. She doesn't really have as much satire as she did in the book, and she's more seen as like a complex like figurehood, more of like a parental figure who's just looking out for their daughter, which that's not how she's portrayed in the books at all. She truly doesn't want Gwendolyn to marry Jack because she's so obsessed with reputation and outward appearances, and she wants Gwendolyn to marry someone in their class or higher. And also, I thought that Gwendolyn, she was still very exaggerated, but I just thought that the way that they treated her character was more, she's very vain, which obviously she is in the novel, but she's not as exaggerated and she's not as over the top as she was in the book. In the book, she's incredibly dramatic when Jack asks her, well, what if my name wasn't Ernest? Would you still love me? And basically like prompts that question of would you love somebody or like someone if their name isn't Ernest? She goes on to say, oh no, like I would never ever, be with someone whose name isn't Ernest. Like what? And she's so over the top. And I felt that that was missing sometimes in the movie, especially with the rivalry with Cecilia, or yeah. And she's more like, the rivalry isn't as intense and as dramatic as it was in the novel. That's what I got out of it, and that's what I kind of saw in the film. And the next thing is this book takes place in the Victorian era London, and the movie does a really good job at capturing that. But there's certain moments in the movie that I thought that they played heavily on romance, which that was not. This is not a romance novel. It was not prevalent in the importance of being earnest, the novel by Oscar Wilde. There was never really a time where Oscar Wilde employed a literary device that would invoke a lot of romance or that tone. It was truly like satirical, very much a like kind of call out to society in a very like satirized way. And the for example, like Jack's proposal scene in the movie has like a lot of music to it, and it's kind of built up as a very like romantic, ominous thing, which that's not how that was really portrayed in the book. In the book, it was not a big romantic thing, and that kind of took away from the the satire that's in the novel, but also kind of that cynical tone because Wilde doesn't build up these moments to be super romantic, super romanticized. They're kind of just there, and they continue to further add onto the plot, but they're not like true romance scenes, if that makes sense. And um one thing that I found very interesting is in the novel, the name Ernest is a big, it's huge. It's Wilde uses it as symbolism all throughout the novel, and it's a call out to the fact that these two men hide behind the name Ernest, appear very honest and sincere to society, but behind closed doors, they're deceiving their lovers and their partners. And the movie does something so laughable. They have um what is Jack in the film have a tattoo that says Ernest, and I just thought that that was like very much kind of dumbs down the symbol of the name Ernest. It it just it the fact that he had that tattoo on himself, I just thought that that was very interesting. It's not something that would have happened during that time period. It's not true to the time period, and it almost just kind of, I don't know. It was odd. I thought it was strange. It almost downplays the the name and the meaning of that name, and it it takes the symbol of the name and the double meaning behind the name and makes it like a really cheap gag, more comedic than anything because the name Ernest isn't really used as comedy in the novel. It's used as irony. But in the film, the name, like the tattoo that says Ernest on him, that almost makes it seem comedic and like cheap comedy more than anything. And it takes away from the fact that the name Ernest shows how these two men are so obsessed with their reputation and how they appear in society that they'll go to extreme lengths, even hiding behind an alter ego and using the name Ernest to deceive people actively when that name means to be sincere and honesty. So that just cheapened that huge symbol in the book. And that kind of all of the literary devices kind of tie into the universal idea. And in the novel, the kind of universal statement is, how people kind of hide behind a different identity or a different appearance to seem a certain way in society, but in reality they're truly somebody else behind closed doors, and they don't live up to those like moral expectations in society that they claim that they do. And Oscar Wilde calls out how in the Victorian era people were so obsessed with their appearances in society. They were so obsessed with keeping up with a very conservative environment and society. Yet, I mean, they actively deceived people and they were liars behind closed doors and they weren't true to who they were. The movie, because it cheapens that symbol of the name Ernest, and it also kind of dumbs down and changes some of the characterization and makes them seem like with characters like Lady Bracknell and Gwendolyn, kind of taking away their more exaggerated elements and even like adding like more romance to it, kind of takes away from what Oscar Wilde wanted to portray, and that was the fact that they were so hypocritical in society, and he wanted to call that out. The movie doesn't really do that. It's more like idealized. There's less critiquing of society, as I've said so many times, and it doesn't feel like a social critique at all. And it took creative liberties to kind of modernize the film, but still fell flat from what it was. That's why I gave it 2.5 out of 4 stars. It's enjoyable on its own, but it's not true to the play.
I give the 2002 film of The Importance of Being Earnest a 2.5 out of 4 stars for the literary lens of gender roles and other cultural ideologies of that Regency era. I give this a 2.5 stars because the universal statement is much harder to define in the movie than it is in the book. Because I think they don't reference allegories, issues with the tax collectors in the movie as much as they do in the book, which I think undermines the whole him being, it makes him seem less earnest or more earnest than in the book, because it's more things that he's lying about and more things that he's saying isn't true. I also think that in the movie, the satirical language that they use is more ridiculous. And I'm saying that rather than in the book, Oscar Wilde uses the irony and hypocrisy of the characters and in a ridiculous manner to show society's ridiculous views and rules that they have on others. But in the movie, I think they drove it to almost like an immature, over the top, wishy-washy use of that satirical language. For example, in the scene where the two girls are running from their fiancés because their fiancés just confessed that their names were not actually Ernest and they were just lying about it. The two girls are giggling and they're all with each other and they go back and forth on whether they're gonna forgive their fiancés a lot, which again I think undermines the whole idea of the book, because it's made to make us see how honestly stupid society's rules are, while society is very serious about it, just like the girls in the book. But that is not, however, seen in the movie as strong as the book. I also think that society in general was lost in the scene where Lady Bracknell is interrogating one of the Ernests, Jack, I think, because again, with the whole handbag thing, she's very comedic about the whole thing, and it makes a good movie, but I don't think it's showing what Oscar Wilde was meaning for it to show as well as it could have.
Hi, this is my critique of the movie portion of The Importance of Being Earnest, and I'm giving it 2 out of 4 stars because, as comedic as it was, I feel like it did not capture the critique of the Victorian society that Oscar Wilde was trying to show in the play. By comparing the characters in the play and in the movie, we can see this. So if we start with our 2 male leads, Jack and Algernon. Jack, the reason for his alter ego as Ernest is because he's a low class guy. And by having that higher class person of Ernest, he's able to do stuff in the city that he wouldn't be able to get away with if he was seen as a lower class person, even though Lady Bracknell finds out about his lower class status. And then Algernon, the second male lead, the reason for his alter ego as Bunbury is because he's able to get away with not having to go to social interactions. And basically, Oscar Wilde is able to show there's a distinction between why both of these characters have these alter egos, which is lost in the movie because of how similar they are in personality. They both are just there to like interact socially and just find love, I guess. Gwendolyn, I really did not like Gwendolyn's portrayal in the movie. She felt very modern for what is supposed to be a Victorian movie. Cicely, however, I really did like Cicely. I feel like out of the four major characters, she was definitely the one who matched her original character from the book the most until the end of the movie, where she became very similar to Gwendolyn, even though they didn't really like each other till like the last few minutes of the movie. For the supporting characters, I really liked Lady Bracknell. Lady Bracknell, out of all the characters in the movie, was definitely the one who matched what Oscar Wilde was trying to go for in the play. She definitely showed the critique of the Victorian society and how she interacted with Jack and how she blew him off because of his low class background of being found in a black bag. I really did like that. For other stuff I really liked the settings of the movie, especially Cicely's little learning area with her teacher, Miss Prism. It's like a wildflower garden area, and I think it represents what's going on in her brain because she's kind of a little bit airheaded and delusional. She's only 18 and she's very young for that time, so it represents how she's just like very frazzled in the mind. And I like the outfits too. They very much represent a Victorian era. However, one thing that really brought down this movie for me was definitely the ending of the movie. So basically, it is found out that Jack and Algernon are long lost brothers, but because they've both been lying to Gwendolyn and Cicely that their names are Earnest, that's found out that neither of their names are actually Earnest. But basically, after they find out that they're brothers, Jack decides to lie and say that he found out that his name is actually Earnest to Gwendolyn, who he loves, supposedly, which I feel like definitely undermines the entire point of the book, of the play and the movie. The title is literally called The Importance of Being Earnest. And in that moment, Jack is not being earnest to Gwendolyn. He's supposed to be sincere and show his love for her. Yet by lying and still saying, oh, my name is Ernest, it just defeats the whole purpose of why this play exists in the first place. And then for Lady Bracknell to not say anything about it also kind of ruins her character for me. Like, she's definitely still one of the characters I like the most. But I feel like for someone who would critique Victorian society, she wouldn't like people lying about their names, especially to her own daughter. So for her to not say anything about Jack lying about his name being Ernest, definitely it does not match her character. And this is why I have to give the movie 2 out of 4 stars, because it definitely feels like the director of the movie just read the play as it is and did not look into the deeper meaning behind the book. And that's it. Thank you.